Today, we're going to be talking more about behavior. What is it? How can you think about behavior in your startup and helping people along the journey that they're on? How to use this framework of behavioral design to then use that to create your products and really create the impact that you're looking to make with your startup. So as Jacob mentioned, partner and CEO at Headway, and you can connect with me here on any of these for questions or even just to say hello. And quick background for those that aren't familiar with Headway, our mission is to bring entrepreneurial ideas to market and keep them there. And we help founders and innovation teams launch new ventures. So startups looking to launch new products, corporations that need to innovate, and all of this is about behavior change. And even though your startup could be on a different journey where you're trying to discover, is this a behavior that we can create in somebody? Is this something that they're already kind of showcasing? Is it demonstrated demand? All the way to growth phase, all of these concepts will apply to your startup. And so the first thing that's really important is for us to just understand behavior and kind of peel back the onion on, when people say behavior change, what does that mean? Well, let's start with behavior first. So behavior is a noun, and this is kind of an adaptation I found where essentially it's the way a person or a thing acts or reacts. And so when you're looking at new ventures, when you're looking at creating your startup, there is this aspect of understanding what someone does today. Like, how are they actually living out and proving out that they have the motivation, that even though their ability might be low, are they highly motivated to go ahead and change their behavior and put a different process in place, create their own workarounds for to get to a specific outcome, all of those things. And so we'll start to dig into these, because the reality is that out of all the things that people say they'll do, there's a very small amount of what people actually do. And that's not because people lie or they're evil or any of those things. It's because we try to think of ourselves in this ideal world, and we try to think of ourselves as the imagined future. And when it comes down to it, we have all of these distractions. We have all of these different motivations, all of these different factors that pull at us, that prevent us from making progress. And so when we think about behavioral design, it's important to really think through how do we help people understand the journey they're on, commit to the journey they're on, and then how can we be an asset to them on that journey and help them get there. Another thing that's really important about behavior change and understanding it is that it's all about building effective startups is all about behavior change. If you can't change what someone does, what you do, what your product does, if you can't get them to use it and actually get the value out of it, your startup's not going to be around for very long. The other thing that's really important to note, and we'll go through this, is behavior isn't constant. It changes over time. And it's easy for you just to reflect on your own behavior and think about New Year's resolutions, think about different things that you've said you wanted to do, or journeys that you've started, or apps that you started using, and how highly motivated you were at first and how that dwindled over time, right? And that constant struggle and that constant pull of all the different things happening changes our behavior, changes what we do. Even if we're highly motivated, the ability to do it may be really tough. I think one other point that I want to make before we go through this model is nothing's transactional, it's all relational. So everything is a funnel, meaning there's no such thing as obviously in sales or in your product, you might have an annual product, but if you don't help build a behavior and help your customer to get the value out of why they purchased your product, the outcome that your product provides, they're not going to renew, right? But even inside of that funnel, so once they buy, you need to make sure that you're being a shepherd and a guide to them on that journey to help make sure that they get there. So we won't talk a lot about this. I just want to reference it and kind of support that everything is a funnel. As you think about your startup, this is the Pirate model by Dave McClure. But once somebody is acquired as a customer or even pay, you still have to activate them. They have to complete their profile. They have to come back. And that retention is where you're actually going to provide value for them. Like not in actually just setting up and getting their account set up, but them coming back, getting the value that you hope to provide for them. So let's dig into the Fogg behavioral model. And we've talked about it on other things, as I mentioned, and BJ actually updated it a few years ago from triggers to prompts. Essentially, they're still the same thing, he just calls them a little bit different. And so the idea here is that to design for a specific behavior, you need the motivation, you need an ability to achieve it, and you need something that kickstarts this whole process. And if you're familiar with some of the other concepts inside of behavioral design for startups, there's something by AARRR that's kind of an adaptation of this called the hook model that uses different concepts of like variable reward and behavior change, but we're not going to talk about that. It's definitely a good book to look into and understand how your behavior is being gamified by companies, by social networks, and that's even something that you could dig into. I'm trying to think of the documentary that's on Netflix. But anyway, let's dig into here. So where many founders start here is the ability of how somebody will achieve something. And what we'll do is talk about giving them the ability doesn't necessarily mean that they'll actually follow through and you can change behavior. And so Saeed said, yeah, same. Isn't this the thing, is the hook principle? Yeah, so the book by AARRR is based on that. So it's actually based on this model. Yeah, the way a habit's built. Yeah, essentially. So the model that AARRR created in the persuasive lab at Stanford is based on this, this BJ Fogg behavioral model that is more about behaviors, and Hooked is all about like power of habits, which is a little bit different because it does introduce some things like variable reward and different things like that. But we'll continue moving here. So where many founders start is the ability, how they'll achieve it: solution, idea, service, product, application, process. Like, what is the thing that's gonna get somebody to do this specific behavior? And I think a big thing here is, understanding motivation, and we'll dig into this kind of matrix of motivation. Is, do people know it's a problem? How big is it? In some of our other series coming up, Ryan digs into this pyramid of understanding how motivated people are and how do you identify early adopters that have high motivation, even if your product's not super polished. Like, how can you still start to capture those early adopters? Understanding why people want to solve it. Like, why are they on this journey? What are the intrinsic motivations that they have? What are some external motivators that they have? Did they recently get a diagnosis of their health that they want to change something? Did someone in their family do it? Like, what are all these factors that add up? And understanding what makes people decide to then go and follow through with specific behaviors. So the other thing about behavior is understanding, how people have tried to solve it today. We've talked about that. Understanding what substitutes are, so when you're looking at launching your startup and creating behavior, looking for demonstrated demand. Like, what are people buying today? What are people voting on with their time? Those are all good indicators to understand if there's enough motivation for them to actually follow through. So one thing that we'll dig more into for this behavioral design for startups is less on understanding how we uncover motivations, understanding, users, psychographics, all of those things, and more talking about the prompts that kickstart the whole process and how you leverage those inside of your startup. So inside of BJ Fogg's model, there's things called prompts. There's three types. There's sparks, facilitators, and there's signals. And these facilitators are something that's directional, that's informational, that guides someone to action. And so as you look at motivation, very high. As you look at ability, kind of low, kind of in the middle, like enough to act, but it's not high, high and high like signals are. And this is something that somebody has very high motivation, but they're confused about the next step. They're not sure what they should do, right? They really want to achieve it, but they don't know the steps to take to get there. And so that's where these facilitator prompts come into play that usually involve some sort of education. They involve some sort of directional guide that gives somebody a plan to go through. A spark, on the other hand, is a trigger that comes with added motivation. So this is something that tries to remind people of why certain things are important. Why should they continue to care? And we'll talk about some principles and key takeaways that you can take back into your startup in a few here. But essentially, like, somebody has the ability to do it really quickly, but you have to remind them why. These are most common in nudges, notifications, things like that in your app, where you're trying to bring people through on the journey that they said was important to them. And we need to, as founders and as teams, remind them of why it's so important and what happens when they continue to follow through. The last one is signals. So this is something where motivation super high, ability super high. We just need to give a user permission to start, a starting gun as an example. We need to give them a signal that essentially tells them they can go ahead and get started. And this is most often something that happens at the beginning of your product, and it's kind of this one-off event where you have this ability and this motivation that aligns really well. And so what happens as you think about this action zone, and this is kind of taking those factors and putting it on his model here. They have what they call the behavior action line. So anything down here that's in the red, that's in the yellow, people fail to act, right? They ignore them. This is kind of where those different types of prompts land. So again, facilitators, things that are high but hard to do, meaning like, I'm really motivated, I'm not sure how to get there, how to do that, what steps do I take, help me, essentially help facilitate my journey there. The other one is signal, that's high, very easy to do. Then the other one here is a spark, where the ability is easy. Hey, maybe it's a notification that reminds me to do my daily journal. But did I really have anything that I want to journal about, right? If you think about the different apps that you're using and how this affects you, I think it's very, you can start to reflect on where things, spark you to action, and what things in your mind, as you look at all the notifications, you look at emails, what things do you start to ignore? And in most cases, it's because of lack of motivation, not because it's hard to do. In some cases, the friction or ability to do that is hard, but. So it's important here, the right motivation at the right time. So if you trigger people at the right time, they will thank you. They will be over the moon about your product, about your service, about your business, about whatever you're doing. They'll thank you. If you if you hit someone up with high motivation, or you have a product that doesn't allow them to follow through, they get frustrated, right? So if you're telling somebody, you're capturing somebody at, let's say, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. Let's say you want somebody at 11 p.m. at night, they decided they were going to get started on their fitness journey, but everything was closed. They're going to be frustrated, right? Or like, I'm trying to think of, some other things. But essentially, if you trigger them when the ability isn't there, people get frustrated because they can't follow through. They can't act on that motivation. And if we have no motivation, you'll annoy them, right? And I think you see this when, maybe even subscribing to newsletters and content that you see, where you start to trail off and really put on kind of this newsletter blindness, where you'll start to kind of check out, and eventually you get annoyed to the point where you just unsubscribe, because the motivation to get the content and to get that is no longer there. So we'll keep going here into an example. So example one is a solo weight loss and fitness journey, something that most of us can relate to, whether that's gaining muscle or losing fat or just getting in better shape. As I mentioned before, behavior isn't constant. So day one, we have high motivation, its ability. Let's say, we're just getting started. So this is kind of the path where we need a facilitator. We need to find somebody who knows, maybe some paths that we could take to work out, right? Like, what are the different exercises that I can do? What are my goals? Like, where do I go? I'm not sure. What are the right things I should eat? Does sleep affect my fitness journey? How do all these things work? And those are questions that I have high motivation, but it's hard for me to start, because I now have to go on this journey to, I've decided that this is important to me. I know why I'm on a specific journey, and now I have to try and figure out how to follow through. So the ability is just to, hey, maybe I just go for a run, but I'm going to be on this journey of information to try and figure out, like, what's the right thing for me to do right now? And I kind of need that facilitator. And that's where you see coaches, that's where you see things start to come into play, where you have somebody with high motivation and they're just looking for okay, what's the next best thing? What's the next step I can take to get me going on this journey? And it can be frustrating because if you look online for fitness or weight loss advice, everybody's different. There's no one true one size fits all. There's a lot of competing advice. And so that ability to just have clarity around, okay, where do I point this motivation? That can be really difficult. As we think about 7 days into your journey, and maybe just think about, a New Year's resolution that you might have had, hey, 7 days into my journey, it's getting easier for me to actually fulfill and actually go to the gym. Hey, I know more exercises. I know what to call them. I know maybe how to start splitting up exercises, and the abilities there, like I know I have a membership to a gym. I know what I'm eating. I'm starting to get the rhythm of this, but my motivation is kind of down. It's not all hoorah rah that I thought it was going to be when I got started, and now I'm kind of going to the gym on my own and working out. And as we think about day 15, I'm kind of at this line where and this is where a lot of people, and we talked about habit forming products and in some of the comments here, this is where habits start to fail, where we have dwindling motivation, like maybe we saw some results and we got complacent, or we didn't see enough results, and so we got even more frustrated. But like, we know the things to do, right? We know the motions to go through, and that's part of this journey where a lot of people drop off. And in this case, in this example, as we get to day 20, like, we're in the red, we're not taking action anymore. And so there's studies out there that say it takes 21 days to form a habit. And so if we can't keep up the motivation and the ability and the right balance to get into this phase, this is where we fail to form habits. And the same thing is true for your startup. When you're thinking about onboarding somebody, they're really motivated up front when they sign up, when they give you their information, they maybe fill out a profile, but they kind of lose sight of the journey that they were on. And in a lot of cases, if you're not there to remind them and use these prompts, they'll begin to kind of trail off. And that's where you see these users churn that maybe have the best intentions and they're people that you can actually help, but you fail to bring them through this journey with you and really optimize that funnel that we talked about before. Now let's take a look at another example here that is a supported weight loss and fitness journey with a trainer and with critical prompts. And so day 1, same thing, high motivation, ability is kind of hard, but you're starting to get the hang of it. Maybe you meet with a trainer, you say, hey, today is the day I start. Help me set me up with a meal plan, help set me up with some sort of fitness plan where I can combine meals with kind of exercises. And then we go to the next week. So day 7, I'm still very high. I'm interacting with my trainer daily, or maybe every few days. They're giving me tips. I'm getting feedback on how well I'm doing, right? Or how I'm starting to master the form of certain exercises. I'm starting to take my first week results. And in the first week, I've seen a lot of results. And since I'm accountable to somebody and I'm kind of reporting back, that might also include taking 1 week photos. Hey, day 1, you took a photo of where you were at. You have a goal that you documented. You talked with your trainer about why is it important for you to lose weight. And you said, hey, well, actually my mom passed away from a heart attack, or so-and-so in my family just got this diagnosis and I need to make a change now, right? And so it's something that's very painful, that maybe is emotional strain, that's like something that's causing you to act, that's is a big important reason for you to continue. And you say, hey, as I think about my life, my lifestyle, I want to have kids and I want to be around when they have kids. And so your motivation becomes different. Your why kind of brings you along. And so that trainer is going to use that why, just like you should in a product. And we'll talk a little bit about some key takeaways here. But having people commit and tell you why they're on a journey, getting some information from them can give you fuel to remind them of the journey they're on and what happens when they come through this. And as we look at 2 weeks out on day 15 here, you see motivation still high, ability is getting easier. We're starting to move up into the right, where all we need is that ability to, sorry, not ability. All we need is that signal where it's like, hey, I know exactly what I need to do. And we're starting to get closer there, where you're getting into that routine. And when we talk about habit forming, like, it's really a signal that tells you, and like you're kind of programming yourself to understand why you're doing something and how exactly you're going to do it, right? And so as we move up and to the right, in this case, that's how we build successful products, and that's how you make sure the impact that you as a founder set out to achieve actually gets fulfilled by your users, is bringing them along the journey, understanding their why, understanding the motivation, and keeping that up throughout your product and throughout your onboarding experience. And so here, day 20, we see we're kind of in this sweet spot where things are going to start to get easier, right? And this is where you kind of see motivation and ability start to change, where people get challenged, right? So after your first month of programming, you might have another 3-month chunk on your fitness journey where things get really hard, right? Like, hey, now you got the basics down, you got the form down. We're actually going to put you into a CrossFit thing or a boot camp or something that's going to start to challenge you and make it very hard, where you're going to doubt yourself, but you're going to fight through it, right? And so it's kind of always changing based on the factors that actually exist. And so when you think about your product, think about it as like you being a facilitator and also being someone that's there to remind them of the journey they're on and how they can achieve that. And then as you think about balancing, the strategy behind what you do and also your design and development, is like, this is why intuitive products are so important. But if you give somebody the ability but don't have the motivation, they're not going to follow through. So it could be the best looking product, it could be the best workflow, but if nobody's motivated to actually do it, you're not going to see people use your product. You're not going to get adoption. So just some key takeaways as we think about applying these to your startup. Would encourage you to empower your customers to reflect. So we use these in a lot of our products, and there's products out there like Noom, there's other habit forming products that are really trying to use behavioral design for good. Like, use onboarding assessments and have your customers tell you, like, why is it so important to you? And not to hold that against them, but to remind them, like, you are the guide that's here on their journey, and whatever journey that is, whether that's, to help them win at work or to help them win personally, or help them win in their relationship. Like, understanding the why and being able to remind them in your products is really, really important. The next thing is to make it easy. So help your customers succeed and make it easier by removing steps and friction. And this answers that ability. Somebody could still have high motivation, but it could be very hard for them to be successful. And that's why it's hard to get things started and to keep them going. So removing steps, working on your user experience, working on listening to your customers and where things are hard will help you make things better. And then I think, this ties into that first point too, but can't overstate it. Understand and empathize. So understand the motivation they're at, their goals, remind them of this journey. Like, so much of us, as you think about things outside of products, lots of people have mentors, lots of people have coaches, lots of people have people in their life that they use to keep them accountable. And if you think about your product, your job should be to design a system in a way that creates the right motivation, that gives them the right ability over time to be successful and to hold them accountable and to help them know when they're in that sweet spot so that they can keep making progress together. And another thing just to remind you of is that motivation changes. So use the right prompts at the right time to elevate what it means to use your product or service and that motivation. So kind of covered a bunch of topics in a short amount of time, but that is kind of what we have today. Hopefully that was helpful for you to think about the journey and how behavior isn't transactional or just one-off.
All right, awesome. So if you head to headway.io/foundersmindset, it's a free video series that we've created for founders to basically understand some of the thought processes behind making better decisions as a founder, how you can think about failure, how you can think about decision making, the difference between building a product versus building a business, risk management, founder market fit, things like that. Feel free to head to this landing page, and you can get access to all the videos for free. The other one I wanted to share was on our resources page. Is we have a customer journey maps and user flow template. You can use it within Figma, but they have a new tool called FigJam. It's similar to Miro, but we created a template in there to start like UX mapping, getting your customer journey maps figured out. Actually, Billy has a breakdown in a YouTube video on how to use it, how to get started, how to think about it. It has some customer goals and themes matrix that you can set up for your research, app and map flows templates. So you can just start to kind of figure out how your user would engage with your product and what that map looks like. So rather than starting from scratch, you can start from here so you can get further faster. Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to share today, Andrew.
There's not. As Jacob mentioned, this will be up on the YouTube channel. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Hopefully it was helpful for you to think through how behavior changes, I think is the primary point, and how you might think about using the model to keep your customers engaged and hopefully make the impact that you're looking to make with your startup.